All right, we're back again. Today we're going to be talking about eugenics and industrial growth. I know we talked about eugenics during vocabulary, so most of you were pretty interested in that, although it is a dark subject. All right, so first, the practice of eugenics in Virginia. Eugenics is the belief in the possibility of improving the qualities of human population by discouraging reproduction by individuals presumed to have undesirable traits and encouraging reproduction by those who had desirable inherited traits. Eugenics was a movement throughout the 20th century worldwide as well as in Virginia. The main thing you need to know is eugenics demonstrates the misuse of the principles of heredity. So in the Buck versus Bell case in 1927, the United States Supreme Court upheld a Virginia statute for the sterilization of people considered genetically unfit. Upholding Virginia's sterilization statute provided for similar laws in 30 states, and under those laws, roughly about 65,000 Americans were sterilized without their own consent or even that of a family member. Think about that. They were basically rendered so that they could not have children ever because the state thought that they were just not intelligent enough or they had some type of undesirable genetic defect. I know when we did vocabulary, we talked about this. There is good intent in the laws. They just didn't do that to be mean. They're trying to make a healthier population. But at the same time, that kind of cuts into the whole idea of freedom in America, which, again, as you've learned in this class so far, there's lots of things that cut into that. So here you have a type of a propaganda poster. You're going to see more of these like when we get to World War II, but only healthy seed must be sown. I remember during the pandemic, there were lots of posters around showing people about wearing their masks and getting vaccinated, etc. So this is like very similar in that way. You would see these everywhere, including clinics and doctors' offices. This is the actual historical marker for Buck versus Bell. I know you've seen these all around town here in Hampton, but this one's in Charlottesville. This was a really big deal. So again, it ends up coming to an end, which we'll talk about more later. You'll ultimately have a brief assignment on Buck versus Bell. All right, next, you can see this is a picture of Carrie Buck and her mother. Now, this is the quote from the judge. It says, citing the best interests of the state, Justice Holmes affirmed the value of a law like Virginia's in order to prevent the nation from being swamped with incompetence. 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. That's very, very dark. Think about how sad that would be to not have any say in the matter. And then the other side would say, does she really even comprehend what's at stake? So again, that's above my pay grade, but that's really, really hard to fathom. During the early 20th century, America shifted from a primarily rural society to an urban society. So now we have the growth of cities. As the nation's industrial growth continued, cities such as Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and New York grew rapidly as manufacturing and transportation centers. Hopefully you already know where some of these cities are, but we'll definitely have an exercise for the geography. But then we have factories in the large cities provided jobs, but workers' families often lived in harsh conditions, crowded into tenements and slums. Cities such as Atlanta, Birmingham, Dallas, and Houston also grew very rapidly in the South, although they didn't have as many immigrants. Industrialization, the reputation of capitalists as captains of industry or as robber barons. So we talked about them during vocabulary, and some of you have done your slideshow on them. Very interesting characters. But anyway, the excesses of the Gilded Age. What that means, the word excess, they're living in luxury. They're so rich that they can do crazy things. We saw examples of that when we watched the movie Titanic. That was one of the reasons I wanted you to see that, is those people are kind of out of touch with the regular society. There's also income disparity, which means the rich are extremely rich and the poor are extremely poor. Lavish lifestyles, the mansions, all the people who are doing the projects about the Gilded Age homes, they're going to be able to show us in more detail. And the ruthless business practices of capitalists in the forming of monopolies and trusts. So, monopolies in particular, we have talked about. That's where, for example, John D. Rockefeller bought out all of his competition. So, if you wanted oil to heat your home, he was the only option that you had. You couldn't go somewhere else because he bought all of those companies out, and then he controls the price, so he can charge anything he wants. So then you might ask, what is a trust? So a couple different things you can do with the trust. It's generally employed to hold assets. So if you own a company, things that are part of the company or money, you can hide that from creditors or other people who might have a claim on them after you die. Trusts are often used to set up to keep assets safe from a family member who might try to take over. But they're not just for rich people. You can also use trust to provide peace of mind, to make sure that money goes to the right people when you die. So just like everything through this unit, when we're talking about the economics, there's pros and cons, for pretty much all of it. For example, we talked about corporations. There's a really good part of that to protect you from liability, but at the same time, it can be abused. Trusts are very similar. All right, so next up, we have an example of all of the excesses of the Gilded Age. We have a man named Whitaker Wright and his underwater ballroom. So Whitaker Wright is an English man, obviously from England, but he comes to America to get rich because, America is the land of opportunity. So you're going to be seeing some pictures now of what he created based on the money he made by ripping people off. Yes, he was very deceitful and basically scammed a lot of people. So right here in this picture, you're looking out across a man-made lake that he made, and you can see a statue in the distance. That statue is where this underwater ballroom is. So in the foreground, that circle closest to you, that is a set of steps that goes down, a spiral staircase to go down to the tunnel that goes across the water to where that statue is. So right under the statue is a dome, but there's a tunnel in two different directions going all the way to the far side of the lake. So this is pretty crazy. You can imagine how much money it would take to make this. But again, the lake is man-made. He dug it out and then built the dome and the tunnels, and then they filled it. So with this picture, you get a look as you're going down the steps. Today, there's an iron gate that's locked, so you can't go down in it. But from what I understand, these pictures came from the last person who had access to it from outside of the family or whoever owns it. I don't believe the guy's family owns it any longer, as I'll tell you what happened to him later. So once you get inside, down at the bottom of the steps, inside past that iron gate, you can look up and see that circle that you were looking at before, which is basically ventilation. And this is looking down the spiral staircase. At the bottom of the spiral staircase, going into the tunnel and looking back at the stairs you just came down. And this is looking in the other direction, going further down to the tunnel towards the actual dome. Don't pause here. It'll let me know if you did, and it'll kick you out and you'll get a 0. All right, this is at the end of that long tunnel. There's an opening, and in the area you're looking at, I'll show you another angle in a second, but the dome is in the distance through that little archway, but there'd be pool tables and food and things like that in that area you're looking at. So from that last picture, if you look to the left, this is what you would see. And this is looking up the staircase. So you're halfway out through the lake now, roughly where the statue was that you saw. After coming up the staircase, you see there's a patio out in the middle of the lake. You can see the statue right in front. That's the dome. Basically, the statue's sitting on top of the dome, but you'll get to see inside it in a minute. Now, that long, sidewalk you see in the distance, that's where his house used to be, but all the people that he ripped off basically burn it down. So I'll show a picture at the end of what his original mansion looked like. All right, so this is inside the dome, and you're going to see various pictures. But again, yeah, it looks dirty and all because it's over 100 years old, which is crazy in itself. But again, no one's cleaning it. Back in his time, there would have been divers sent down to clear the algae and stuff off of it. So it's been just sitting there for 100 years with nobody using it, and who knows if it's even safe. That's why they won't let people in anymore. Okay, these are pictures showing how it was built. So you can see from the top, they dug out the area of the lake and built the structure. And then eventually they just dug down deeper until they hit water, and it filled in with rainwater and spring water. Down at the bottom, you can see it was decorated. There was like a lounge area, a tree in the middle, whatever. Kind of crazy. A lot of money. Even, hard to imagine something like that today. So another picture from inside the dome. Again, it looks dirty, but again, what do you expect? It's been 100 years. More of a wide angle shot here. And again, like I said, it would have been cleaned back in the day. There would have been furniture. It would have been highly decorated, carpeting, etc. And there's some carp. I'm sure the lake is filled with all kinds of different fish. So this picture is at nighttime from standing on that patio. The dome lights are on underneath. And, in the darkness, that's pretty cool. And finally, another picture from the same angle, but in the daytime. So again, the picture shows up at the top, the house is gone. The original mansion was burned down. So what happened? This man basically came to America, scammed people, took advantage of their investments, and then fled around the country until eventually going back to England. Back in England, he was caught and he went to court, and he actually chewed on a cyanide capsule to kill himself rather than go to jail. So this is his original mansion, and there's other pictures online showing it halfway burnt down, but evidently today they've cleared it out, and the previous picture showed what's there today.